Okay, then we can go ahead and get started and wait for people to come in. Just as a reminder, this meeting will be recorded and we'll be sharing the recording on our website and on our YouTube as well. So there's any time you'd like to unmute and ask a question and maybe pause the recording, please let us know. But throughout the session, you could also put in questions in the chat and we'll answer them as we go and also in the Q&A session in the end. So hey everyone, welcome to our August International Achievers webinar. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, especially with school starting back up. And I know today is an SAT day as well. So for those who may be joining us for the first time, the International Achievers is a student-led platform focused on connecting students with people from different academic, professional, and career backgrounds. And the goal for us is pretty simple. We just want students to be able to hear directly from people who have actually gone through the paths that they're considering. And yeah, a lot of the time when you're in high school or even in early college, you're trying to make decisions about your future based on what you see online. I see we have a lot of middle schoolers joining us too. And I think one of the most valuable things is just being able to sit down and really ask someone what it looks like for them, what experiences they have, etc. And over the past several months, we've had conversations with people working and studying in a range of fields from medicine and nutrition to pulmonary and critical care, public health, and wellness. And every speaker has had a very different path, which is something I really like about these conversations. And today's conversation is especially relevant for anyone interested in medicine, neuroscience, research, public health, or the pre-med path. So today I'm really excited to have Jayden Kratt with us. And for some context, she recently graduated from Macalester College with a BA in Neuroscience, where she graduated Summa Cum Laude and completed the Neuroscience Honors Program. She also studied chemistry, biology, psychology, community, and global health. And she's explored many different areas and changed her ideas about what she wanted to do, had moments where she felt behind, and ultimately found her way toward medicine. So, Jayden, thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to talk with us today. I'll hand it over to you.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for having me, Aditi. Just to reintroduce myself, my name's Jayden. I use she, her pronouns. I just graduated this last May from Macalester College in Minnesota. I'm currently, on the pre-med path. I'm planning on applying to medical school next year, so to start in 2028. And right now I'm working as a medical assistant to gain clinical experience, but I'm really excited to be here today to talk to all of you about my experience and kind of the different road bumps I've had along the way and how I've navigated those, and hopefully answer questions that you guys have about the path. So we can go to the next slide. This is kind of today's roadmap for now that I have planned. So I'll kind of talk through my experience on deciding on a college, deciding on a major, and then the kind of steps I've gone through to establish a strong base in the subjects that I've been interested in. People talk about the light bulb moment of medicine. I would say not so much of a light bulb. It's been kind of a slow growth thing, but talk about some moments that I had and then talking about how I decided on my path forward and what I'm planning for my next steps from here on out. So the first thing has been deciding on a college. Um, yeah, so these are kind of some of the things that I asked myself during that journey. I went to a pretty academically intense high school, which I definitely learned a lot, grew a lot as a student, but ultimately that was not the kind of learning environment that I felt like I really thrived in. So I was thinking about what kind of learning environment do I want? With college, you get to choose where you apply and where you go. So I knew that I wanted to make sure I was going to somewhere where I knew I would be able to really take advantage of my love for learning and collaborate with others who had the same ideas as me in terms of the learning environment. I was thinking about how does this college contribute to my academic goals? Well, coming out of high school, I knew I was going to study something sciencey. I wasn't exactly sure what, and I also wanted the chance to take random classes here and there for fun. And so I wanted to find a school that would align with those goals. And then also just how does the general environment of the college align with my personal goals? So for me, I like going on adventures and trying, different restaurants, different activities, things like that. And so I wanted to find a college that was situated somewhere where I would be able to do that. One challenge I did encounter during this like kind of choosing a college process was it was kind of hard to stay strong in my own decision making amid outside judgment. You know, you get a lot of judgment maybe from your parents, from family, friends, classmates, things like that. And so it was a bit of a challenge to feel really strong in my own decision for what I knew what was right for me when there was maybe some judgment from people around me who didn't necessarily want to go on the same path I did, which is fine, but it was a bit of a challenge when I at least first kind of chose to go to Mac. So you can go to the next slide. So ultimately, I chose Macalester since it has a very collaborative academic environment, which I was looking for, and very strong science programs where I would be able to really excel, learn a lot in the sciences, and also take random classes. So, some random classes I took. My last semester, I took an Introduction to Buddhism class that was taught by like two professors who have like different scholarly backgrounds in studying Buddhism. So, I got to kind of hear about it from two different perspectives. I also got to take some like cool, I took a geography class where we got to go on a field trip actually to northern Minnesota to actually see the geography that we'd been learning about in class. So that's why I really love the liberal arts as a model. And it was a really great fit for me personally. And also Macalester College is located in Minnesota's Twin Cities, and so it was this urban environment where I got to go to different things like art fairs and different pro sports games and things like that. So I was able to have this really great academic experience with kind of having fun and my as I'm 18, 19, 20. And so, what I kind of learned in this kind of phase of life that I think is an important takeaway is that it's good for you to really take time to reflect on your own goals and desires away from external pressures, because later on it will help you feel a lot more secure in your decisions, as you know that that was truly what you wanted. And so, if you second guess them later, you can kind of go back to what your original thought process was around that.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing the beginning of your journey, Jayden. And I really like how you mentioned all the art fairs and the games. It really looks like you were able to enjoy your college life while staying on top of things, which is something a lot of students really worry about, finding that work-life balance, which I'm pretty sure we'll be touching upon later. And also just to let everyone know, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can always put them in the chat and I'll ask them to Jayden, or you can even send them directly to Jayden. And then we'll also be having a Q&A session towards the end. And Jayden, you did mention choosing Macalester because of the collaborative environment and being in a new place. So for a lot of high school students who are currently looking at colleges, what do you think is something they should really pay more attention to beyond just looking at rankings or prestige, which is something a lot of us tend to do?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that was really helpful for me, and I think the thing that really made me feel secure in it, is if you are able to visit a college, go visit it and try to visit it during a time when there are students there, which means probably not summer break. I worked in admissions while I was at Macalester as a tour guide, and so I got to interact with a lot of high schoolers that were going through this college process, and I found that interacting with the students who are actually there and going to school and doing all their things was really helpful for me in figuring out kind of which people felt like my people in a way that when I was in high school, I was kind of like, I don't know how you figure that out. Like, that felt like such an abstract concept to me, but it truly was. Macalester was the last school I visited. I visited at the end of spring break, my like senior year of high school. I was like 2 weeks away from the commit deadline. And I just like, I found that after my day of visiting, I was like, oh yeah, this is the right spot for me. And so I would say really take advantage. If you're not able to visit a school in person, a lot of schools do things like student panels and other things where you're able to get more of a feel of the types of students that go to that school. So I would say just take advantage of whatever opportunities you have to interact with the people at the schools you're interested in, because that will give you a good idea of the way that like students get supported and things like that.
Yeah, definitely, because I do still have a lot of different colleges in mind, and it's really confusing to know specifically about college life without actually going and visiting the campus and maybe speaking with tour guides and admissions officers when they mention a lot about club life at school. Like there's so many student clubs you can join and so many niche topics that I'm interested in as well. For example, like I started the nutrition club at my school and I was wondering whether there are different nutrition clubs at college or anything related to that. So really speaking with the tour guides as well because they have personally experienced these clubs or moments on campus really helps. And we do have a quick question from Art, which is, do you recommend to visit colleges in senior year or do it way earlier?
I would recommend going sooner. This is probably going to age me a little bit, but COVID happened at the end of my sophomore year of high school, and so my whole junior year was online, and a lot of schools weren't allowing in-person visitors for tours. So senior year was kind of my only option to visit schools. So I think sophomore year might be a little bit early for like seriously touring colleges and really looking at ones that you're interested in. So for like sophomore year, I would recommend maybe finding like just a local college that maybe you are interested in, maybe you're not, but that you're not necessarily making a whole trip to kind of get a feel of what the tour experience is like, how to ask questions, who's available to ask questions or to answer questions. And then kind of junior and senior year is probably the better time to do that as you get more of an idea of what you want post high school. Because I'm a big proponent of enjoy the spot that you're in right now. You don't need to be thinking about where you're going to college your first 2 years of high school. You still have more than half of the experience ahead. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's always a good thing to be exploring, but I think junior and senior year, you're able to get a little bit more out of the experience than you would earlier on in high school.
Yes, and I also think in junior year and senior year, you'll know more about what you're looking for, comparing your experiences to your first 2 years in high school as well. You'll know what sort of activities you're interested in and whether the college you're going to supports that ambition that you have as well.
Yeah, so then the next kind of step was once I'm in college, deciding on a major. I was lucky. I went to, so the liberal arts college model a lot of the time, and at Macalester specifically, you need to declare a major to register for your junior year classes. So you basically can get all the way up until March or April of your sophomore year before declaring a major. I know for other schools, sometimes you have to apply with a major, but for me, I wanted that extra time to really decide on what was right for me. And like I mentioned earlier, I was kind of thinking about the sciences and I was thinking about which aspects of science interest me. I really enjoyed like AP chemistry in high school, so I was thinking maybe I'll go into chemistry. I wanted to think about like what did I want to actually spend my time learning? You get a feeling in high school about, what classes do you like, which ones do you not like, and kind of what you enjoy learning. And then it's also important to know like what do you not want to spend your time learning about. Obviously, it's all once you're in college, a lot of it is free will. So, um, you want to be doing things that genuinely interest you. Um, One of the kind of challenges that I ran into at this point in my journey was figuring out like, could I have done more? Could I have like fit another major in, fit like trying to optimize everything? But ultimately, I just kind of came back to these questions and what I had reflected on about, do I actually want to be doing this because the classes sound interesting, or do I just want to do it to have it on my transcript? And so ultimately, everything that I did do in college was because I genuinely wanted to be taking that class and learning about the things in that class. So we can hop to the next slide. So I ended up choosing neuroscience because all of the classes at Macalester in the neuroscience department really interested me. The Mac neuro department does it so that you take like half of your classes with the biology department and half of them with the psychology department, which I really enjoyed because I got to really see how these two kind of different sides of neuroscience actually had a lot of overlap and figure out like how do they weave into each other and things like that. So chemistry, biology, and psychology I was really interested in, but there were just some classes that I was like, I would rather spend my time taking like a random non-STEM class. So I ended up just minoring in those other three fields because there were some classes that I was really excited about and I wanted to take them, and there were others that I was less excited about. And so here I learned that really enjoying what you do will make you a more engaged student. If you are in a class and you hate the class and you don't want to be there, like it's not going to be as fun. You're not going to gain as much out of it. And like both, especially in college, like your peers and your professors know when you're not enjoying it. And you want to make sure that you are contributing positively to the learning environments that you're in so that you're also able to gain as much as you can from those learning environments. We can head to the next slide. I go in a little bit more into the field of neuroscience. I know one of the questions that someone had before the webinar was kind of about, should I pursue neuroscience? What's the scope of it? So again, it's kind of this intersection of biology and behavior that centers on the nervous system. So like your brain, spinal cord, nerves, all that fun stuff. There's a lot of different areas of research that you can go into. So these are all some of the different areas of research that I tried. So for cognitive, behavioral, and cellular and molecular neuroscience, I was able to do research in all of those fields in my classes that I was taking for the major. So for example, in the cognitive neuroscience class, we learned about this thing called a divided visual field paradigm, where you get images on one side or the other of your visual field. And based on people's reactions to those images, you can see how different hemispheres of the brain react differently to those images. And so, in that class and groups, we got to develop a question based on existing scientific research to see if we could find something new in terms of differences between the brain's hemispheres. And then neuropharmacology was the field of neuroscience that I engaged with for my research and eventually my honors thesis. So the lab I worked in specifically looks at developing possible therapeutics for substance use disorder. And so I learned more about kind of the molecular parts of how like different drugs and therapeutics work on the brain and how those can affect physiological outcomes. So mine specifically looked at how this one specific drug can actually cause like systemic hypothermia in mice, which is pretty cool. And then my specific thesis was looking at sex differences in that response. I don't know if we have any questions at this point about like neuroscience, picking a major.
Yes, we actually do have a question, which is about work-life balance, but I think we might be exploring that in a couple more slides, so we can wait for that. But also touching on what Jayden talked about, like especially when you were explaining all of your summer research and your projects right now, I just realized it is so important to also speak with many different people who have taken a variety of different courses or really fields that you're interested in. For example, like webinars like these, or even taking part in your school's job shadow program or finding connections. Because if I hadn't spoken to a couple of different people about what specifically they are doing in their major, because a lot of us tend to think of biology or neuroscience as just like studying about the body and its systems and like doing different lab work. But for example, you mentioned drug testing and studying images of the brains. And I think really going into detail on what they do in each class or each field to some extent, and you can see whether that different topic interests you or not, will really help you either narrow down solutions or look at many different fields you're interested in, just because it opens doors to so many different pathways for you as well.
So the next kind of step was I had chosen a college, I chose a major. Even before I had decided on pre-med, I knew that I had to establish a strong base for myself as a student. While I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to go to med school at that point in time, I did know there was very likely to be more school in my future. And so I knew that really establishing myself as a good student and figuring out habits that worked for me would be really important. And so I thought about, how do I want to be spending my time? How do I want to balance, the classic work-life balance, figuring out which habits are serving me well in terms of helping me stay, happy and healthy and continue to do the things that I enjoy doing, figuring out which things are maybe draining my time and I could figure out how to kind of cut them out a little bit more. And then find time to explore my interests, whether academic or not. I wanted to figure out how to incorporate all of these kind of questions into my life. I found that the challenge here was feeling behind if you don't have your whole future planned out. I didn't decide to be pre-med, like technically, until I was 20. Um, there were points in that where I felt like, oh, like other people decided when they were maybe, 15 and in high school, which if you did, that's fine. But I definitely felt a little behind in that I was kind of late to the party, so to say. And it felt like other people had already done all of the research and the clinical experience and the shadowing, and that it felt like I kind of had lost out because I had spent time exploring things. We can hop to the next slide. Um, so what I ended up doing was I spent my first 3 years of college really exploring these different areas of science, just kind of going with what interested me rather than deciding that I needed to do only the thing that I knew would serve me 10 years from now. I also do think that everything I have done will serve me somehow, some way, as you learn a lot of skills along the way. And then also establishing good habits. I'm probably going to touch on this later, but go to sleep, get sleep. You can't truly engage in all the things you want to engage in if you are tired. That was a thing that growing up, my mom was always very strict about sleep, and I kind of carried that habit with me. And I think it served me really well in terms of staying engaged in different activities and then have budgeting time to like just have fun things, hang out with friends, things like that, things that really fill your cup. And the lesson I had learned from all of this was that as you think about all of the things that you are engaging in, like just spend time doing things that, as I say here, like truly fill your cup. Anything that you do, if it's something that you're enjoying engaging with, you will learn something from it that will be valuable for you to carry on. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, I worked as a tour guide in our admissions department at Macalester. This isn't necessarily like a pre-med activity, but I learned a lot about how to, talk to people, give presentations, learn about people's backgrounds and figure out how I can best help them and things like that that are really great life lessons, whether or not if I were to not go into medicine, I would still carry those lessons with me. So just stay engaged in what you do. And if you're staying engaged, like you will learn things that will be helpful, regardless of whether or not you think they're on the like right timeline.
Definitely. And I really like how you touched on sleep because that was the question from earlier about how you balance sleep and your academics as well. Because a lot of people sort of center medicine or like that field around losing a lot of sleep. But you've showed that it can be done whilst having a good amount of sleep as well. Because obviously there might be some days where you do have to stay up, but making that into a habit will definitely affect your health as well, especially since you studied neuroscience and now you know the effects of sleep on the brain and how it is important for you. And you did talk about spending your first few years building habits that supported your well being rather than constantly trying to maximize every minute. So, how do you balance these academics, research, athletics, and actually, living life like you mentioned? Because you were also a student athlete throughout college, and I know being a student athlete, it is really difficult to balance time as well.
Yeah, I would say my Google Calendar became my best friend. I think having some kind of planning system, whether that be, online or a physical planner, is really important as it helps you block in kind of the non-negotiables. So things like sleep, eating, going to class, things like that. And so that then you can add in the more flexible things later. Because if you're always just budgeting, you know, time that maybe you don't even really have, then you're going to find yourself really overwhelmed. And then as a result, start sacrificing things like sleep and spending time with family and things that you enjoy. Um, yeah. So use a calendar. It's very helpful. So my kind of not so light bulb moment, I guess, in my pre-med journey was like pre-med had always kind of been in the back of my mind as a possible option, but I had always kind of just tried to explore other things too because medicine is a very, very long journey, and I knew that it was something that if I was going into it, I wanted to have really thought it through and have thought through other options as well, and not just have decided on it and not looked at anything else. So, through kind of like my sophomore year, summer after sophomore year, I had been exploring the possibility of some kind of like PhD or research-based career in like kind of health biomedical spaces, and was also thinking again about other like science careers, scientific communication, things like that. I decided to start kind of looking into medicine a little bit more. I did a study abroad program fall of my junior year that was primarily public health focused. So I took kind of a full break from hardcore STEM and did more social sciencey stuff, which I really enjoyed, but realized then also that probably just a public health focused career wasn't going to be necessarily filling my cup in the way that I wanted it to. And so I decided, I'm gonna like start thinking about this medicine thing a little bit more and set up some experiences to give myself kind of a taste of what that could look like for me. And so from my little hotel room at study abroad, I applied for a volunteering position, which I got, where I was volunteering at a children's hospital in Minnesota as a surgery center volunteer. So I was helping both like our child life specialists with preparing things for the kids in the surgery center, as well as helping escort parents in and out of the operating rooms as, after their child would get given the anesthesia. And so that was kind of my first like official clinical experience. And I started that February of my junior year of college. So way past the halfway point, I was getting that first clinical experience. And again, this was kind of another thing of feeling like I had fallen behind. I had classmates that had been doing like clinical based research since freshman year or had been shadowing doctors since their senior year of high school. And I kind of felt like, oh, I'm so late at this point. I only have about a year and a half left of college, and there's still so much to do as time has gone on. Kind of the, I guess, requirements to get into med school have gotten like greater and greater just in terms of how much time you have to commit to it. And so when I first was getting involved in kind of the pre-med space, I was very surprised at how much I would need to invest. And now I kind of have my plan for that, but it was definitely kind of a shocker at first. So we can head to the next slide. Um, yeah, so sorry, I forgot to edit this slide, but the main lesson that I had carried away from all of this was that like you're gonna be like 30 or something anyway. You might as well set yourself up to do something that you know is right for you. If it takes you more time to figure that out, that's okay because you're gonna reach that point in life anyway. So might as well take the time that you need to ensure that you're going down a path that you'll enjoy.
Definitely. And I also liked how you touched upon not pre-med not being one singular light bulb moment, just because a lot of people think that if you decided to become a doctor, you just decided it ever since you were born, like, oh, I want to become a doctor. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to work towards it from like middle school and high school, which a lot of people do think of. But really exploring different pathways is important. Even I realized that as a high schooler, just because if I ever narrow it down to, oh, I'm only going to be doing this and never look at any other field ever again, like computer science or law or policy, because everything intersects. And the more you look at these different fields and look at how they intersect, you see that there's so many fields that lie at the intersection of all the topics you're interested in, and you could possibly pursue that as well. For example, I'm interested in environment and also health, and I see how it the environment affects nutrition and how different policies advocate for all of these choices as well. And I was like, I'm interested in this particular aspect. So I'm not shutting myself off of exploring any other topic just because I've already decided what I want to major in. So definitely Jayden's exploration that she did in the first 3 years of her college, I'm pretty sure really helped her decide what she wanted to do and where she wanted to be and what she wanted to take away from everything she's learned.
Yeah, so deciding on a path forward from there once I kind of knew, yeah, the next kind of goal to achieve for me is medical school. I knew that I would have to take some kind of time to really gain more experience because again, it's a really, really big commitment to make and I wanted to ensure that it was the right experience for me. So I had made the decision to take some gap years between undergrad and medical school to gain that experience before applying. But I found that the challenge was getting enough diverse exposure to the field to be sure that I wanted to go into it. A career in medicine can look like such a huge array of things, and it's really hard to find out what options there are unless you start talking to people. And so when I was just looking at it kind of individually, I was like, this is very overwhelming and there's a lot. Um, so we can head to the next slide. I'll kind of chat about how I dealt with that. So I ended up planning my next steps with help and advice from my professors, peers, like that had already decided on pre-med earlier, different mentors that I had both kind of at college and away from college. And then I really was able to tap into the Macalester alumni network and alumni who had already gotten into a career in medicine and were at different stages there and found that really helpful. And so the lesson I learned here was use the resources and people in your network that you have. People are usually like more than happy to help. Worst case scenario, if you send a cold email or cold message, is that they don't reply, in which case you spent 2 minutes drafting an email that like it's better to shoot your shot with trying to connect with people and for experiences like shadowing, learning about different specialties, things like that. I was able to tap into my network to get those opportunities. And so, really, just take advantage of whoever is available to you to help you plan out those next steps, whether that be family, friends, teachers, mentors, things like that. If you have more questions, like I'm more than happy to help. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or other platforms, which we can talk about later if you want to send me a message on Zoom. But yeah, just use the network that you have and really just use it as much as you can, because it'll really help you go far. So I know there were also some questions about kind of what does the pre-med path look like, so I can also chat a little bit about that. What I've found is it's kind of four main pillars. So one, doing the prerequisites. So things like general chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, biology, some like different like kind of writing intensive classes, things like that. This can be done in your undergrad. This can be done as part of like a formal post-bac program, or you can just kind of take the classes at somewhere like a community college after you've graduated. So if you really want to go study some things that are not related to the pre-med prerequisites, you can do that and still be pre-med and either take those prereqs alongside your college curriculum or take it afterward. Typically, you do have to take the MCAT, which I'm currently studying for. There's lots of times you can take it. For me personally, I knew that I didn't want to be studying for it on top of my like undergrad classes and athletic, like being in season, things like that. I wanted to make sure that I was setting myself up to put my best foot forward on the MCAT because it is a fairly large kind of part of the pre-med path. Getting some kind of clinical experience. You don't really necessarily know if medicine is right for you unless you've experienced kind of working in it to some degree. So that can be things like working as a medical assistant or as an EMT. It's good to get shadowing experience, although that's a little more passive, but it is good for getting experience of just kind of seeing what does a doctor do, how do doctors work in different specialties, things like that. And then other extracurriculars. For some people, they might be really interested in research and want to spend all of their like free time doing different kinds of research. And there are some medical schools that are considered to be more research based. And so having a like research background can really help set you up for success at those kind of schools. There are other schools that may be more like community service centered. So having different experiences volunteering in your community, whether that be related to medicine or not, will end up being kind of part of your application. But really, like every pre-med journey is unique. These are kind of the general building blocks, but it truly is a choose your own adventure situation. And so, as long as you're generally following the like prerequisites, you know, again, this goes back to do the things that you enjoy, and then ultimately you will find schools and careers that will really align with what you enjoy and what you want to get out of your career.
Yes, definitely. And for those who are asking me for Jayden's contact, I will be CCing her in the recap email where you can contact her. And also, I'll be sharing her LinkedIn just so that you guys can connect with her and ask her more as well. And we do have a couple questions here to pause. One of the students are in Texas, and shadowing is apparently really hard to find there. So they want to ask you how this can be figured out or if there's anything else they can do as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I found my shadowing mainly just through connections of finding people that I shared something with. For me personally, it was finding alumni from my college who would be willing to host me for shadowing. So again, I think it's just reaching out to as many people as you reasonably can. Spending the time to learn how to like craft a good email is a valuable skill and learning how to appropriately follow up and things like that. Because a lot of times, like doctors are very busy people. They might open your email, mean to respond, and completely forget about it. So knowing kind of the like email etiquette and things like that um, is important.
Yeah, and also really using the resources from your school because a lot of your school faculty members have connections to different doctors or in any field, different people, just because it could be alumni or someone who's come to their school to give a presentation, or if your school even offers job shadow programs, you can go for a day and then maybe take the contact of that professional to shadow them further more as well, and really asking anyone you know at that point of time if you think they might know someone who is interested or works at the same field you're interested in, a professional, that really helps as well. We have a couple more questions. um, for undergrad, colleges look for grades and rigor of courses is what they're told, and similarly for MD, does the college look for rigor of courses taken during your bachelor's apart from the prerequisites?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have not applied or gotten into medical school yet and have not been in the room with any medical school admissions committees. So I don't know for sure how medical schools approach this, but from what I've been told from different advisors and things like that, you kind of want to balance it. You want to show medical schools that you have the ability to challenge yourself and succeed with those challenges, but then also that you have established a strong base, especially in those prerequisite classes. Those are a good measure for, if you're able to handle the rigor of medical school. So I think that would probably be a better suited question for people who work in the admissions kind of field with MD schools.
Yes, definitely. And also for the next question about volunteering being replaced with shadowing, I think a lot of professionals will be open to that depending on their schedule and how available they are as well. You can definitely start off with shadowing for a day or a week or really according to their schedule. And then as you transition into being more interested in that field and you see, oh, I want to do more at this particular place, you can definitely ask them whether you can volunteer. Is there anything you can do to help, like a research opportunity or just helping them with maybe data analysis or something like that? And they might be more than happy to assist you with that, or they just ask you to continue shadowing, but it's definitely worth asking them if you're really interested.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a journey of planning my next steps. So I was trying to figure out what during this time would make me feel the most fulfilled. This is going to be kind of my only time away from like just constant school and training for a pretty long time. And so I wanted to both set myself up for a strong medical school application while also like having fun and really figuring out what skills will help set me up for this future career choice. And so it's been hard. I've, moved home back to where I grew up. So it's been, learning how to readjust to living back at home and balancing my work and other commitments and keep having fun during this time. I think, now I'm 21, so like I want to be, having fun in my early 20s and really taking advantage of opportunities around me to have fun, but then also continue to further my career. So I'm still kind of in the process of learning how to balance all of that now in my gap years. But overall, if we go to the next slide, I'm really trying to just treat these gap years like a school year because that's what I've been comfortable doing. This is the first time since 2009 that I haven't been in school. So I want to kind of continue that routine because that's what I'm comfortable with. So I'm thinking about kind of semesters of, in my current semester, the classes I'm taking are my medical assistant job, MCAT prep, and then I'm just starting up as a tutor. And so I've been kind of doing these three things as like my three courses, but then once I'm done with MCAT prep, I'll be able to do other things with that time. So I'm just trying to use the skills that I built up in college, balancing my student athlete life with balancing my post-grad life, again, sleep has always been a really big pillar for me. So if I'm getting enough sleep, everything else kind of balances out. Um, but just trying to, use the routines and structures that work for me and continue using those now. I've also learned that really you want to create a path that's sustainable for you. What might be a, sustainable path for someone else might not be great for you. So figuring out what routines actually work for you. Like for me, I had learned during college, some of my friends, they would get less sleep, but then they'd take a nap in the afternoon and they did that every day and it worked great for them. That did not work for me. I would have to just kind of get a bigger block of sleep at night and just stay awake during the day. Um, so just figure out what works for you, and as hard as it is, try not to compare yourself to everyone else because usually they have other needs than you. So yeah, I have another slide kind of about self sustainability. The next slide.
Yeah, definitely. And also, as you mentioned, comparison and everything, I think one thing we can really take away from your journey is that you've set up different systems, you've learned to manage your time, obviously going through different challenges and facing different barriers, but also really using the skills you've learned throughout to set goals and systems for yourself and actually follow through with them and get good sleep just so that you don't feel too overwhelmed. And also comparing yourself, as you mentioned, someone could have a completely different story or completely different interest from you and it doesn't look that way, but really taking the time to look at what you're truly interested in and what really makes you happy, whether it's learning about something or really doing an activity, which is sort of a segue into the next question we have over here, which is about handling mental health during this journey. So do you have any tips for the students or any personal experiences about handling mental health?
Yeah, I think again, this comes back to be doing things that you want to be doing. Like right now, I'm spending about 3 hours a day studying for the MCAT, which I know is important for me because I have, a goal to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward with that test. And I think I would be having a much rougher time with it if it was not truly something that I wanted to be doing. So it's, again, this whole thing of trying to find things that fill your cup and figure out how to balance that all. Um, yeah, and really just surround yourself with people who really support you, and whether that be people who, like for me, I have, support people in my life who like kind of know how the med school application process works, but not really. They just are there to help support me as a person and make sure I'm doing well. And also, I have people who do know exactly how all of this works and are able to support me in kind of the logistical part of that. So I think really throughout kind of your life in high school, college, and beyond, really building that support network will do wonders in helping you stay well.
Yeah, and I think really taking breaks when you need it is really important instead of pushing yourself too much. Obviously, challenging yourself and working towards the goals is important, but there are times when you really do need to take a break in order to be able to put your best foot forward and continue with what you're doing. And we do have another question here, which is, do you think volunteering at the gift shop at a children's medical center will be beneficial for a pre-med PAT during high school, especially since for most clinical experience, their opportunities require you to be 18 or older?
I think it depends. From what I've kind of heard, a lot of schools really look for like your pre-med experiences to be things that are like actual contact with patients. But again, back to the point I had made earlier, anything you do will help you gain skills that will help you be a better doctor, lawyer, researcher, whatever career path you want to go into. So I'm sure there are things like people skills that can really just help you gain the skills that are needed for med school, doctor career, beyond. But in terms of counting as an actual clinical experience, typically schools are looking for things where you're actually having contact with patients.
Yes, and even since you're not really 18 or older and haven't gotten any real clinical experience or clinical experience with doctors per se, since you are volunteering at the children's medical center, you can definitely form connections and ask them whether you'll be able to volunteer or gain any clinical experience once you turn 18, just to really have that path open to you as well.
This is just kind of another slide I put in about self-sustainability and time management. Again, sleep. And then another skill I had learned in high school and was definitely a big part of my high school and college experience being a student athlete is use what I like to call your time confetti. Those like maybe like 20 minutes for me it was, the 20 minutes where school got out at 3:10 but practice doesn't start until 3:45. What can I do at that in between time? Maybe I can, read the chapter that I need to read for my English class or try to, crank out a science problem for my like chemistry problem set or things like that. In college, I played water polo at Macalester and we had to travel a lot. We didn't have any schools that were driving distance from us to play, so there was a lot of time in airports. And so I learned how to just, for when I was working on my honors thesis, just get out my laptop and start writing for the like 30 minutes I have. Is it ideal? No, but does it help you free up bigger blocks of time later to have fun and do other things? Yes. I'd also say budgeting for in between time. If you're just, booking like the actual activities that you have, you will inevitably end up behind on everything because for things like college, if let's say you get out of class at 3:30 and you're planning on doing homework from 3:30 to 5:30, you're not necessarily budgeting for the time it takes to walk from class to the library to go do your homework, or maybe you run into a friend on the way to the library and you're chatting with them to catch up, and then now all of a sudden you're behind on your homework. Like, you want to have time kind of budgeted in there for just the in between time, commute times, things like that, as opposed to just kind of your ideal schedule. It can't be an ideal plan, it has to be a realistic plan for your time. Yeah.
I love the time confetti idea. I've never thought of it that way, but definitely also just getting started will really help you, because then if you're really tired after playing your games, for example, if you're a student athlete, it will be easier for you if you've already gotten started on something before and sort of just going with the flow after, rather than having to sit and now think about ways you can get started, because that will definitely not be the ideal for you, especially you'll be losing a lot of sleep as well. So thank you so much, Jayden, for sharing your experience. We can transition into the Q&A session now. I do already have a couple questions from students. One of them is, how can high school students get involved in research if they don't have any connections?
I would say you can look up different like programs and such that may be near you. I don't have a ton of experience in this because again, I didn't really fully decide on the pre-med stuff until halfway through college, and also COVID just messed up how everything worked for me during high school. But I would say just reaching out to people. You can ask like teachers and stuff as well if they've heard about anything. But again, also not everything has to be an actual experience that can get listed on a resume. I found that I've also gained a lot of valuable information from reaching out to people for things like informational interviews. And through those, I've found out about different opportunities. For example, I had spoken to just a connection I had had about her experience as a doctor. And then while she isn't necessarily like hiring people for research, she knew about this other program that was accepting people for research. And so, everyone, like, you can get information from people, not necessarily opportunities, but I would say the information is still valuable as well.
Yeah, and if you don't have that many connections or aren't able to find like a mentor if you want some for your research, you can definitely just work with a teacher at your school, especially a teacher of that similar subject, or just a teacher who's really close with you. Because they understand you more, and you can talk with them about a particular topic you're interested in researching, and they might have some connections as well, or they would like to mentor you throughout. So you can just definitely talk with your teachers at your school or even your school counselors. And we have another question from Siri, which is, can you explain the process of research and writing a research paper, and how does that work and what you need to do?
Yeah, so I can speak about my journey with my neuropharmacology research. So,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, the lab that I got placed into is actually at the University of Minnesota, which is a fairly large research institution. And that was through a program that my college, Macalester, actually had where you'd apply through our career center to get placed at a lab at a larger research institution, which was really cool. And so my first summer I was there was the summer after my sophomore year. And that whole summer, I really just spent doing research. I wasn't doing much writing. I did some writing about it to practice kind of like writing up results and things like that, but wasn't actually like writing any research papers yet at that point in time. And so then during the course of my junior year, I was kind of in communications with my PI or principal investigator about possible continuations of my research for the next summer. And that's when I started thinking about participating in the honors program at Macalester and doing a thesis. And so I spent, I would say, kind of the spring semester of my junior year really writing up the proposals and stuff for the actual research that I was going to be doing with my senior year, kind of the summer before my senior year. For people who might be going to doing research at the school where they go, they can continue doing the research during the school year. For me, that wasn't super realistic in terms of like commuting over to the university during the school year. So I knew that in my case, I had to make the most out of my summer. And so I spent the summer after my junior year doing like full-time research. Every day I was in the lab, working with the mice. And then I spent both kind of the summer of before senior year and the fall of my senior year kind of beginning the writing process of like writing my literature review and the kind of background needed to understand my research. And then I spent my spring semester, right? Actually, I have my thesis right here. It came in the mail a few days ago. It's like the bound version. Um, but it was probably spring semester of my senior year. I was probably writing for about 45 minutes to an hour every day working on it. Probably about 25% of it was written in airports during water polo travel. Um, but yeah, for me, it was the writing part was a little bit more of an independent study just because of the nature of how the Macalester Honors Program is. Um, and mine was kind of a bit more independent as opposed to sometimes research will occur where, you have like 12 people working on the same project and contributing to the same paper for that. It really just kind of depends on the lab that you're in, the size of the lab, the type of research, things like that.
Thank you. And then we have another question. I'm actually interested in the answer myself as well, which is, can you explain a little more about the MCAT process? How much time do you spend every day, and what particularly does it cover?
Yeah, so I kind of developed my MCAT plan. I think on week 5 now of my prep period. Um, I developed my personal plan based off of there's a lot of people on YouTube who like to talk about their MCAT prep. So I tried to kind of cross-reference different videos and things I had watched related to that. For me, I'm doing what's considered kind of more of like a part-time prep where, I'm doing other things during the day. Some people will do their MCAT prep like during their 10 weeks of summer break and they're studying for maybe 8 hours a day, kind of as a full-time job. For me, I have a job, so I'm not able to study for 8 hours a day. And so my personal plan is I'm doing about 3 hours a day, 6 days a week for probably a little bit under 6 months. And I, again, have been using just kind of a combination of like YouTube and other internet resources to compile a plan that feels right for me. So currently I'm in the process of just kind of reviewing all of the science. I like bought a textbook set for that. Um, but just kind of reviewing like the general chemistry, organic chemistry, biochemistry, psychology, physics, all that stuff. And then probably in about a month here, I'm going to start really working on doing practice questions to, work up my testing stamina and really practice that because it's a very, very long test. So it's important to be able to build up the ability to sit for that long and do it.
Yeah, I think that is really important as well because especially for the SAT, I mean, the SAT is only 2.5 hours to 3 hours. And even that, like during the English module, the module two, like you get kind of sleepy. So I think definitely taking practice tests to see how long you're able to focus is really important and try to pinpoint ways in which you can improve your focus during tests. And we do have another question. What kind of jobs would you recommend for getting into medical college?
I would recommend kind of whatever interests you. For me, this idea of like kind of being a medical assistant, for me specifically at a smaller clinic, was something that was really interesting for me of getting to really interact with like patients and the doctors kind of in more of a one-on-one setting to get like mentorship and really just learn how the medical system can work was what was important for me. Some people I know are like some of my classmates who are also on kind of similar timeline trajectories as me. I know some people are doing like there's a research post-bac program at the NIH where you're doing kind of either like bench research or clinical research for some gap years and then apply to medical school. Some people might work as like an EMT. I have some friends who are in programs like the Peace Corps or Teach for America. It's again just kind of whatever really interests you. What med schools are really looking for is that you have reflected on a career in medicine and that you have kind of the proof that it's the right path for you. And so that can look like a variety of things, and that you want to be able to stand out and be able to genuinely speak about the things that you've done and that you enjoyed doing them. You deliberately picked them out for a reason, not just as a checkbox.
Thank you so much. We do have a final couple of questions over here because we have 2 minutes left. Or you can put it in the chat. We have another question from Sonia. What advice do you have for an incoming sophomore in an 8-year BSMD program in terms of preparing for medical school?
Have fun, like find things outside of school.
Hmm.
Really enjoy that time. I've found that a lot of the like friends that I've made in my kind of earlier college years have been really important for supporting me now. And really just find routines and stuff to help stay like healthy and sane. So whether that be figuring out like what kind of exercise you like to do, what kind of fun things you like to do with your free time, knowing those kinds of things earlier on will make it so that it's more effortless to incorporate those things into your routine as things get busier later on.
Definitely. I think really finding balance, or not even balance in the sense like doing something you love that is necessarily not related to your job or your academics and something that just makes you feel fulfilled is really important for your mental health as well, which does take a toll on your physical health. And Jayden can stay a bit longer to answer questions if needed. So if you guys have any final questions, you can put them in the chat right now. But otherwise, I think this is a really good place to wrap up. Overall, we had a really good and productive webinar. Thank you so much, Jayden, for taking the time to do this and just really being so open about your journey and not only just talking about your accomplishments, but also the challenges and barriers that you faced and the uncertainty that you had and all of the decision making as well that came along the way, because I think that is really important in terms of any career. And yeah, we do have a few questions I see. How will robotics be helpful for BSMD? This is an interesting question.
Ooh. I'm not really sure. That's not a field I've necessarily engaged in with a lot. I think it depends on, what kind of things you're doing, how you've maybe learned to solve problems or communicate with others. Things like that can be helpful again. Learning how to kind of market the skills that you've obtained in different activities can be really helpful. But I'm a big proponent of YouTube for learning about different kind of things with the pre-med path. And so for a question like that, I would recommend looking at maybe some online resources about how robotics may tie into kind of BSMD experiences.
Definitely. And also really if you're interested in multiple different fields and if you look at the intersection, you will definitely be able to find some sort of career or pathway or any subject that you can sort of see that overlap in your interest in, just because it's so interesting robotics and pre-med, for example, not a lot of people would see overlaps, but there definitely is. So really exploring that and talking about it with different people as well. Maybe someone who's only done robotics and someone who's only done pre-med, and asking their opinions about it, and also looking for people who've done both. But yeah, thank you to everyone who joined us today. I hope you're able to take away at least one thing that was useful for whatever stage you're at, whether you're in middle school, high school, college, or even trying to figure out what you might want to study. And if you're considering medicine yourself, if you enjoyed today's session, you can follow the International Achievers on Instagram, LinkedIn, and we also have recordings of our past webinars on YouTube with recaps and resources on our website. All of it will be linked in the recap email along with the recording that I'll be sending out a couple hours later once the recording is finally loaded. And also, I'll be CCing Jayden again, and you can email her with your questions or any other opportunities. And I'll also be attaching her LinkedIn so that you guys can connect with her and ask her anything and stay in touch with her in the future as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your weekend. Last question. Is there a way to sign up for announcements for more such webinars?